The Western Australian Premier has flagged restrictions on short-stay accommodation after another study showed Perth has the lowest rental vacancy rates of all the capital cities. Mark McGowan has rejected calls to outright ban short-term stay platforms like Airbnb, saying that's a big call, but he says some changes are on the way.
It's a bit of a vexed question. What we're looking at is certain limits on how long you can run an Airbnb without council approval if it's not on your actual home site, if you know what I mean, if it's not the sort of the studio at the back. But that's something that will come out over coming months.
And that is the WA Premier Mark McGowan. For more on this, let's hear from Amanda Walker, the Chief Executive of online booking platform Aussie Holiday Stays. She joins me now from Perth. Good afternoon, Amanda.
Hi, Laura.
Now, there's a bit of back and forth about what the biggest contributor to low rental vacancy rates around Australia is. In Perth, the rate is as low as 0.7%. Are you noticing an increase of new properties coming onto the booking system in the Perth area? And what role do you think that is playing in the number of available rentals?
Look, Laura, I think it's a really complex problem, and I think the short-term accommodation sector has been a scapegoat, an easy scapegoat for the government and news articles up to this point. I think the issue is far more complex. However, there has certainly been an increase in short-term accommodation on our platform, especially since COVID, with the increase in demand for self-contained accommodation. So I think it plays a part, but unfortunately, I don't think we're the root cause of the entire issue.
Why would a ban be such a big call, as the Premier said?
I think people immediately think Airbnb and think holiday short-term rental, but the reality is that the sector caters for far more than that. You know, if you've got a problem with your home, with insurance short-term accommodation, if you're migrating to an area and need short-term accommodation until you find your long-term space, even corporate travel where plumbers are travelling to different towns to do work, short-term accommodations are a really broad area and a really integral part of the community. So if you take that away, society overall is worse off.
Now, you heard the Premier there discussing that they could look at limits on short stays, but it's still not yet confirmed. What kind of impact is this uncertainty around what and when having on your sector?
Look, there is uncertainty, and I think there are some really loud voices in the area with different agendas, which make people a bit wary about which way the government's going to go. These discussions have been ongoing, Laura, since like 2019, when the government had the inquiry initially, and some really interesting recommendations came out of that, which were quite level and recognised the importance of the short-term accommodation sector. So I'd like to see that the government falls on that side of regulation, but not heavy-handed regulation where you put the short-term accommodation sector out of the market.
Should investors reconsider buying properties just for short-term stays for the moment, do you think?
I don't think they should reconsider, but I think they should be in contact with their local council. Local council, I feel, are going to have the final say in what regulation happens in their area. So before you buy for short-term accommodation purposes, make sure you contact the local council to see if they've got restrictions about tourism zones or particular requirements for the home itself, because a lot of councils are becoming more proactive in this space and regulating around that area.
How many owners do you have on your client list, and what have they been saying about any potential future changes?
Well, it's interesting because we've just moved from WA Homestay, which is a West Australian focus, to launching the national site, Aussie Holiday Stays. So we had about 500 properties when we were WA based, but obviously now we're looking to move to that national market. The word on the street is that they just want some certainty. The majority of people on our site, we work with local councils to only ensure registered properties list on our site. So the hosts that we have on our site are not going to be affected. They're already registered with their local council. They're doing the right thing. However, they just want to make sure that there's not going to be any further regulation that makes it uneconomical for them to move forward.
What changes do you think would strike the right balance for your sector, for your clients, and for those who are looking for somewhere to live?
Look, I think especially with large tourism areas, and I know over east you guys have got the Byron Bay issues, and Queensland is suffering some issues where there's just an influx of tourists in the area, and a lot of people find the short-term accommodation sector more lucrative, and therefore don't have that option for renters. And I think local councils really need to be able to find that balance between allowing locals to find housing in that area so they don't become soulless, travel hotspots as such. But also recognising that short-term accommodation, holiday accommodation, is hugely popular. And if you don't want high-rise hotels, how else are you going to house these tourists and have all of that wonderful influx of tourism dollars? So I think a statewide register is a really proactive idea. It allows people, if they've got a problem holiday home next to them, to know that they can go to a source and make a complaint if they need to, so they can be heard. So people have a central place so they can nip these things in the bud. Also making a code of conduct. I mean, this is stuff that everyday people do. They do the right thing the majority of time, but making sure that everyone has to play by the same set of rules when they're going on holiday and being respectful of neighbours, noise curfews and stuff like that. So the community at large doesn't have to be put out by these short-term accommodations. None of those are hugely controversial, and they don't make this industry less competitive.
Yeah.
So I think things like that can make a big difference.
Indeed. Well, Amanda Walker, thank you for taking the time to speak with us this afternoon.
My pleasure, Laura. Thanks for the call.